Welcome to another episode of the SoleSavy podcast. My name is Marco Henry Negrete. Today I'm joined by the SoleSavy CEO, co-founder, and a proud owner of 1986 Air Jordan 1s, which we'll get into in a second, and the guy who provided him with that shoe, who some would say curated that shoe for him. It's Ty Engman, the founder, the owner of Curated Van, the go-to source for vintage Air Jordan 1s and a lot more these days. But I'll go ahead and pass it to Ty. Ty, thank you for joining us, and share a little bit with our audience about what it is you do with Curated Van.
I guess I wouldn't call myself like a typical reseller. Almost, to sell like a lot of vintage Jordans as well as Nike SBs and Dunks. More so the first releases, such as like 1985 Jordan 1s or 1994 Jordan 1s, which would be the second release of the Jordan 1s, as well as some of the other original Jordans and other early 2000s, late 90s Nike SBs, as well as Dunks. So yeah, just vintage for me, none of the new releases, but that's just because I have a passion for vintage shoes and really like the community that's behind it.
Yeah, I have to ask, man, it sounds like you're definitely on the younger side of the age group from DP and myself. How does someone like you get into vintage sneakers, vintage Air Jordan 1s, which, you know, release long before you were born?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think you were born yet, because I was like 3 years old. So
well, no, you weren't born.
No, I wasn't even born yet. What are we talking about?
Ones? Yeah. So yeah, man, how did it start for you? How did you stumble upon the vintage scene? Were you into sneakers first, or was this kind of your first entry point to it?
No, I was definitely into sneakers before I kind of entered into strictly selling or even just buying. I guess it started off just me buying, and because I had an interest with these vintage sneakers. So personally, I like thrift a lot of my clothes and such. So I was kind of intrigued by just vintage sneakers in general. I think I bought my first pair in like 2016, maybe 2015. It was a pair of Chicago's. I got them off Grailed. I think at that time they were like $500, but now they would be like over $2,000. So it's kind of crazy just to see the market. But yeah, no, I just personally have an interest in vintage items. And I think that like the collectible aspect of them is very cool, as well as obviously the sneaker aspect and the look.
So what was it about that shoe? You know, you stumble upon it and you're like, hey, that sounds kind of cool. I'm a big thrifter. And what was it about that sparked the idea for Curated Van, though?
Oh, that was later on. That was eventually I got like enough pairs that I was wearing. And then I started I started sharing them to Instagram. And a lot of people showed interest in it. And first off, I started selling on Grailed. And then I was like, okay. But then Grailed, I had some issues with Grailed. I got like charged back on multiple times, and I was just like, I don't know why I'm being charged back on. Everything I've done is right. And people were just trying to run me for money. Luckily, I didn't end up losing any of the disputes, but it was definitely a learning point for me. But I think, I don't know, I just fell in love with it, as well as I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. So I think just like the idea of him having that shoe, and it's his first shoe, and me being like a Jordan fan was just, it sparked the idea for me to create that. And then eventually I didn't really realize how big like the community was and how many people actually collect and show interest in Jordan, like whether they collect original ones or just are interested in Jordan. I think that all that's so cool. So yeah, that definitely sparked the idea for me. And then later on it turned into what it is now. I'm super happy because everyone is awesome in the community, and like everyone's always willing to help and such. So yeah.
So how do you, at what point did you decide to go from, I'm just, you know, curating my own collection and buying these different shoes, to like, I have something here that more people want access to, want to find it, and they don't know where to look? And like, what triggered that change in mindset for you?
I developed a big passion for it, a big passion for just collecting the shoes myself, as well as then I saw other people were interested in it as well. But then I also noticed that there was no one on the market that was selling specifically older shoes. Everyone was caught in selling the newer shoes, which still a lot of people are just selling newer releases. And I mean, I see why. Definitely, I'd say more people are interested in newer shoes versus old shoes. And it's a very like niche market for the shoes that I sell. So yeah, just seeing interest from others, I guess, honestly sparked me to see if I could, to push myself to see if I could make it happen. And then it ended up working out. So that's it.
Yeah, I think I remember it must have been probably late 2019, early 2020 when I came across your page on Instagram, because the vintage Jordan 1 bug like had hit me the year before, around 2019. And dude, I was just like going all in. I was like researching everything, trying to get my hands on a pair. And I was even sending you pairs like, hey, is this like legit, or is this a good price, or and condition like that? And for me, it was funny because that hit me like a few months before that vintage wave just took over. The pandemic hit, The Last Dance, and for whatever reason, there's this sudden surge in AJ1 popularity, even more than there was before, but then also in vintage. And I was lucky to get my pair like in early 2020, my first pair, my Chicago's, for a price that was really pricey at the time, but now looks like a steal. And I remember the pair that I passed on, it must have been like late 2019. And this guy had the most beautiful pair of Royals, like, man, fresh out the box almost. And I hit him. Man, I had to get his name because he definitely deserves a shout out here. He just curates some of the best stuff on Instagram too. I think it's Indie Jumpman.
Oh yeah,
he's great. And he had this beautiful pair. And I was like, hey man, like, you know, I DM'd him, hey, what are you looking for this price? Because he doesn't always list his prices, which is smart to get to hear offers. And he's like, yo, I'm looking for about 1,000. And I was just like, you know, because like previously to that, I heard people buying their pairs for 400 or 500. I had just talked to a friend who got a really sweet pair for like 800. I think at Index PDX. So I was like, oh, like, you know, I love the thrill of a good hunt for a sneaker, especially when you find that right price, that right colorway. So I was like, you know, I'll take my chances. And then a few months later, that same shoe is probably worth like 3, 4, 5, 6. I wouldn't be shocked if someone was selling that condition for 10, right? So what do you think's kind of like created that wave in 2020 where the interest in vintage just skyrocketed?
I honestly don't think it was just the shoes that kind of blew up in 2020. I believe it was the whole vintage market. Like I saw a Center Swoosh hoodie sell for 3,600 USD, which is absolutely absurd in my opinion. But then at the same time, there's people that would say like 10 grand for a 1985 Jordan is absurd. So I understand that, but I think definitely behind the shoes, The Last Dance definitely had some impact on obviously creating hype behind the Air Jordan 1, because within that show, Michael Jordan is wearing the Jordan 1 in many of the videos and pictures that were within that show, as well as I think the Jordan 1 is just such a good everyday shoe that can be worn. So I just think people started to appreciate that now, and obviously all the history behind it is another reason. I think those are the main reasons. I'm not too sure what else to say, but yeah. I don't even really know the answer, to be honest.
I mean, the Last Dance is definitely a culprit. I think that was post Last Dance. We saw a lot of Jordans that maybe, 6 months prior wouldn't have sold out. And they were all flying off the shelves. And I think Last Dance came out in April. That lasted until September, October, where it was just nothing was going to sit at that point, especially with everyone kind of stuck at home, looking at more things. And I think that's, to me, what might have contributed most to this is, we're all cooped up at home, not really traveling, lockdowns, all this stuff. We're researching nostalgia. We're watching stuff. We're absorbing different things. And then we go, oh shit, can I buy that? And next thing you know, you're on eBay, you're on Instagram, you're on Poshmark, you're on your Instagram. And I think honestly, that's what happened to me. I was just checking my PayPal receipts for when I bought these 86s from you. And it was June, it was mid-June. I had been keeping an eye on your Instagram for a size 11 in good condition. And that's how we got to it. Right. So I think the combination of those two things, I think the pandemic locking us in helped kind of focus people into, things they've appreciated in the past, loved, vintage, shopping online, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think two things. First, the mini swoosh. I came across, I'm guessing is the same channel that you're referring to, Taya, the live auction. I wish I remembered the gentleman's name, but sounds like that's his beat, right? That's his lane, is those hoodies. And I didn't know there was a market for those. The funny thing about that is when I was a kid, that was like just a common Nike hoodie that I can remember. And I actually wanted the vintage at the time. I wanted the Nike Air. Like I used to be just anything that had Nike Air on it, I love, because to me in the 90s and the 2000s, that was vintage to me, right? That felt retro. And now it's funny that like kind of Nike really reintroduced Nike Air on sneakers and apparel, and it kind of like blew that up. And now people are really nostalgic for just the swoosh by itself, which at the time was new. So that's crazy to see, like on the vintage front. And I agree. I think while I don't dabble into vintage apparel as much as I do into sneakers, I've definitely noticed the trend there across the board. And then the second thing was the Last Dance, man. I'm an AJ1 guy. I've always loved the AJ1, but something about seeing MJ holding and lacing, there's that scene with him in MSG where he's lacing the 85s. Like most people hadn't seen Jordan wearing Jordan 1s, unless you're like a sneaker nerd or historian like us, right? So I think visually seeing the GOAT lacing up that shoe just like made you instantly say, I need that, right? Like, so I think those were definitely two of the main factors. But the next thing I want to ask is really dive into the details of vintage AJ1s. I didn't know this when I first started dabbling into it. And shout out to Dylan Ratner. I did a story. We did a metallic 4 AJ story, AJ4 story, and then he supplied all of the matching metallic AJ1s from the 80s for a really dope story. And it was around that time that I was looking for a vintage shoe, and he was kind of putting me on to the different like factories and variations in models. So share a little bit more about that. Like I like now I'm sure there's different factories as well, especially with the logistics of factories closing, but how does that directly impact Air Jordan 1s from a collector standpoint?
I have a few here just to show you. So there's a factory, there's a factory called TY, there's a factory called TY1, and there's another factory TH, and then there's another one BY. And then there's the last one, I believe, is STP. So TY and TY1 I would say are the most common factories.
For everyone listening, me and Marco are looking at our 85 Jordans, trying to find the TYs on here.
Well, I know this because I sent Dylan a photo and he was like, oh, I think, did you say TH was the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my Chicago's are THs.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and I remember Dylan saying, yo, that's a good pair. And I was like, wait, there's different ones? It's like, so are there a few that are considered better than the others, or better quality or better shape?
Yeah, I would say the STP, the TH, and the BY factories are the best. STP is the best.
Look at this STP right here.
This pair is also STP. I can show you here. This is a pair of blue metallics, and they're like perfect.
Holy, pristine.
If you compare, this is the exact same shoe. Both of them are never worn. This is a TH factory. A TY factory pair. You see how they're cracking.
Yep.
You're saying they've aged better based on the factory that produced them.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
If you look at this pair, there's like legit no cracking.
And what year's that pair from?
These are both 85s.
So you're telling me those are two Jordan 1s from 1985, and one looks like it's from 1985 and one doesn't. One looks like it might be like 10 years old at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what it was or why the materials were so different. Same with the materials within the collar. Some of the factories, like the collar will get crunchy or hard because the foam's hardened up, whereas other factories, the collar will be like still soft, which is just odd to me.
So this is a TH. Collar is just absolutely crunchy. Like when I put it on, I'm afraid that it's gonna fall off. And then on my Royals, this is a TY. Is that one of them? TY?
Yeah.
And this one, dude, like soft, like no crunch at all. It doesn't sound like there'll ever be a crunch there. So now it makes sense. Like there are different factories, maybe different materials.
How the hell where's the book? Where's the manual on this? Like, what are you reading? Who are you talking to? Like, how do you understand all this stuff? Because I know this isn't on YouTube, I think.
No, honestly, there is no manual. Like, there's no manual on any of these factories, and I wish there was, but no one has actually gone to go into detail on each factory. I know some factories have like a bigger swoosh. like the TY factory, I believe, has a bigger swoosh than the rest of the factories if you were to compare it side by side. It's kind of crazy to think about, but that someone needs to go in detail on all the factories, or maybe I'll do it one day. But how I've learned all this is just through obviously handling all the pairs, and I kind of see which factories, in my opinion, are better and which have held up, because I have quite a few pairs come through. So it's kind of just all like stuff I taught myself, or then gain knowledge from it, just from handling pairs.
Yeah. How many pairs of ones have you had come through in the last basically two years, let's say, since you opened the Instagram account in 2019? Hundreds? Thousands?
I don't know. Might be close to 1,000, to be honest. I'd definitely say hundreds. But
nice.
No, I don't think 1,000.
How many did Yachty buy?
Oh, geez.
The fact you have to think about this is
like minimum 10. Minimum 10. And then there's a few other players, and like NBA players and other rappers that buy them. They just want all the colors.
And I'm going to imagine that's because of Instagram. Because I mean, for everyone who doesn't know, you're a Canadian guy. You live in the suburbs, like me. It's, the internet really allowed you to create this account that's curating and finding, vintage Jordan 1s for all sorts of people, right? Myself, Marco, I don't know if you bought anything from him, but obviously celebrities. Like, how did it feel the first time someone like legitimately famous, slid into your DMs and was like, yo, I need some 85s?
Yeah, that was crazy. That was like a feeling that I never really knew I would get there. And I just I was just selling shoes. I was like, we'll see what happens. And I love it. So either way, if I'm selling to a celebrity or not, I love it. So I'm happy with what I'm doing. But yeah, no, the first time I was sitting outside with my parents, and then I had those menthols. I don't know if you guys saw the Ari menthols. I had those, posted a picture of them. I didn't even post them for sale or whatever. And then this guy named Zach Bia messaged me about them, and he's like, yo, Yachty's looking for these. So then I just went in my message request, and then he was there, and then he's like, yo, you got a number? And then we like FaceTimed, and I was like showing him shoes. And then unfortunately the menthols weren't his size, but that was the real first interaction with someone who, well, obviously he's a celebrity. And at that time I didn't really have a lot of pairs though. So he's like, show me what you have in my size. And I was like, maybe you got like 1 or 2 pairs in your size. I really don't have much though. And he's like, no worries. And then, we just kind of started chatting from there. And then eventually he saw Rolo, who's at Dunks Are Nice on Instagram, his picture of the whole 1985 Jordan 1 set. And then Yachty sent me that, and he's like, I need all of these. And that's when we started looking for them.
Nice.
Where's the most surprising place you found a pair? Because I hear all these stories, particularly when I used to live in Portland. I had a buddy who had like the cleanest white and black pair, and he said that his friend found it at a Goodwill in Portland a couple of years prior, like maybe at this point like 4 or 5 years ago, for like, I don't know, steal price, right? So where have you, is it too far gone from that sort of vintage hunting for those type of stories to happen, or have you found someone a pair at an unlikely spot?
I personally haven't found any pairs at a thrift store, but I've bought pairs that were from a thrift store for sure. Like I have a pair of DS 1985 Chicagos that were pulled out of the bins. Sheesh. Which is nuts. And then another pair of Chicagos I had, my friend, his cousin thrifted them for like $10 or something. So then I ended up with those as well. But yeah, a lot of crazy stories with family members that had pairs and they kind of forgot about them. I have another DS Chicago. And this one kid messaged me and he's like, hey, I have these shoes. My grandpa bought them in 1985 and they've just been sitting in his closet ever since, never worn, never touched. He was actually from Alaska, and then I bought those off of him. And yeah, no, just crazy stories like that. Same with this pair. This pair was from this pair just sat in the closet for 30 something years. And then
it must be getting harder, right? Like obviously, pre Last Dance, post Last Dance, even just right now, a lot of people know now that these shoes are worth something, right? It's not like, oh, my grandpa's got some shit in the closet. Can you give me some money for it? It's changed the dynamic. Has it gotten harder to source and find product?
I wouldn't say harder. I'd say definitely some colors are, like, I've seen just the rarity of them like go up. Like Kentucky's, for instance, I'd be able to find a pair of Kentucky blue 1985 ones, or like black toes, and they weren't that hard to find, but now I haven't came across a pair in like months. Today I actually found a Kentucky, but that was a pair that I sold this guy, and then he needed the cash, so he sold me them back. And
speaking of Kentuckies, Devin Booker, cover of Slam magazine, wearing the Kentucky AJ ones. That was a big moment. I think that's when I finally realized that, like 1985 Air Jordan 1s are somehow mainstream now, right? Like they're everywhere.
Yeah, no, selling to Devin was crazy. And I didn't even know that Slam magazine cover was coming out. I had no idea. His homie just told me that they were doing a photo shoot, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm excited to see the pictures. And then the next day I was just getting tagged in their posts, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. It's crazy to see those shoes on the feet now. But Devin is very interested in like the vintage stuff. If you see his cars that he pulls up into games with and stuff like that. But yeah, no, he's cool.
Speaking of shoes that are harder to get than others, is there a unicorn or two right now that's just eluded you that you haven't been able to get your hands on? I know that metallics are tricky about which ones actually dropped, which ones were PEs. What are some of those unicorns out there that you're still waiting to get your hands on?
Yeah, I have 6 more pairs that I need, and they are the metallic oranges, metallic purples, metallic blacks. I know someone with the metallic blacks, but he'll only trade me. So now I'm trying to find these other shoes to trade him for those. And then I need the greens and the burgundies, and then 2 of the lows. So I definitely the oranges are the hardest 1985 Jordan 1 to find, which are the white and orange. There was 1 pair on Sotheby's. That's the only pair I've seen for sale in years.
Coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, the only metallic or to not retro. And I know that there's some questions about black metallics and maroons, but there's also some it's up for debate whether those actually released and having to record those, but the orange ones from that core metallic pack have yet to retro. So rare in all forms.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so that's your personal collection. How many vintage Jordan 1s do you have right now?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. Probably like 20.
And how are you taking care of all that? Because I imagine you must have a good routine or something where you're storing them in that age.
I keep them at like a certain temperature, and as well as they're all in a glass display box with these packs in them, as well as I've leather conditioned all of them and cleaned them all up. So no, as long as I kind of take them out, and then honestly, as well as like wearing them, a lot of the ones that are worn, I have to wear them because I don't want anything to happen to the soles where the soles were like hardened on me, because that's when the soles could harden, is when they just sit in one spot and never move, never flex, so on. So
you're telling me it's time to bust my 86s that day.
The STP factory though, that's one factory where I'm like, I don't know, because I've had pairs for like 3-4 years from that factory and they're still the same.
Yeah, I've worn these once since I got them from you, and I wore them in the rain, in the Vancouver rain. I'm like, what am I doing? What was I thinking? They survived. They're still in one piece, but
yeah, they're super nice. I forgot how nice that pair was.
Yeah. Oh, they fit. I think this is Marco was the first person who said this to me, but the first time I put them on, it really honestly felt like I was a superhero or something, because like they fit so good, and the support's different. The way it hugs your feet is different. Like I can actually see how MJ would have played in these.
Yeah.
Because the stuff that they produce now is nowhere near what this was in 85, as far as like, can you actually ball in these shoes?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Just like the leather, like that neutral gray pair that came out this year. I did the comparison versus my 1985 pair. I thought that leather would like ease up as you wear it, but still stiff as a brick.
1985 Jordan ones, right? Yeah.
I think it's going to take a while to break those in for sure. I appreciate that they use that firm of a leather because they wanted to go all the way back to that look and feel. But yeah, those things are rough. Even rougher, I think. I could be wrong, but even rougher than the New Beginnings pack, which I felt like are definitely tough. But that neutral gray pair feels like really like dress shoe leather, which you got to imagine in 1985 they weren't that far removed from leather only being used on dress shoes, right? When you think about like the Chuck Taylor and then that era of basketball shoes, and then you get into like the Air Force Ones and leather. But the leather industry couldn't have been that evolved yet, right? So it was definitely not as far removed from tough dress leather as we are today, right? With some of that more buttery stuff. I see that you're moving on now to other Jordans, particularly 3s and 4s, so 88, 89. But the challenge with that really is wearability, though, right? So are all the clients you're sourcing for now 100% committed to Sole Swap as soon as they get them, or is it more for like display purposes or a mixture of both?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, the only original release Jordans that can be worn are 1s. I mean, you could wear the 12s too, but the 12s the outsole will separate from the midsole eventually, just because the glue is poor that was used. Mm-hmm. The majority of the people that are buying the, say, 2s to, I think I've sold 2s to up to 6s. I've sold a few 12s and 11s as well, but mainly focused Jordan 1 to Jordan 6s for the originals. And yeah, any of the pairs that have the original midsole, they'll be crumbling. So either if they want to wear them, they have to sole swap them, or they have to display them. There's one gentleman that I sell to in Japan, and he's going to collect all of them. So he buys, whether it's sole swapped or whether it's original, he just wants to collect all of them. So I guess for some people, it doesn't matter. For others, they want it to be wearable. And then for other people, they just want it to display it. Like it's a nice display piece. But
let me punt that question over to you, Marco. Why did you buy your three vintage pairs?
DP, kind of really like shoes, man.
I wasn't sure, but like,
no, for me, again, like it's the 01 Royal, like was as vintage as I got. That's the shoe that's sparked my love for shoes. Well, didn't spark it, but really took it to the next level in 2001. And once I got a hold of that, it's almost an addicting feeling. Like when a particular product line like this is so embedded in history, not only in basketball, but in culture and music and sports and fashion, it's like you get that itch and you're hungry for more, right? And for me, I was like, well, I have to have one pair of 85s, right? I need to, whether I plan to wear them or not. And I wear my shoes, so both of them have been rocked. And then once I got the 85s in Chicago's, I was like, well, come on, I got to get a Royal pair. Like I have every single Royal that's ever released now. At least like the main editions from 85 to 01 to 13, 17, and then like the lows that came out in 13. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's like some KOs and some alpha ones and things like that around that don't necessarily matter to me. I'm talking about just like the classic Royal. Yeah. So for me, it was like about like chasing history, because it's like there's no feeling like it, right? You get that shoe and it's like, and part of it, there's no other shoe where the hunt is like the bulk of the work, because again, we live in a world now where everything's so readily available if you're willing to spend that cash. But when it comes to vintage, you can decide, hey, this is my budget and I'm going to wait for that right time. And I was so lucky on both of these, right? I just kind of like waited. And then once you get that perfect catch, you're just like, you have a special relationship with that shoe now outside of all of the history. And I wanted to go back to what you said earlier about family members. For me, I found this one on eBay, and the description said, original owner. She was like, hey, these are my father's. He used to wear them into the ground. He used to mow the lawn them. He used to do all this stuff. And then, and they haven't been touched for maybe a decade or two. And they're from California. They're from the Bay Area. And I was like, that's cool. Like
Yeah.
knowing the history of a shoe is cool. Knowing that one dude bought these in 1985 or six or whatever, and then kept them forever. Like to me, that made it even more special, right? So I don't know. There's just like you can get lost in a shoe and it's a journey, and it's the birth of sneaker culture as we know it.
I was gonna say that's what made me want to buy the 85s from Utah, which ended up being 86s, but you know, a couple months isn't going to stop me. And then you told me this 86s were even more rare. And I was like, all right, you got me sold here. But like, for me, it was when I think about how important, you know, sneakers are to me, my life, my livelihood, what we're building, what we're doing here at SoleSavy. After watching The Last Dance, I was like, damn, I want to own a piece of history of where that started out from. And that's what triggered my my search. And obviously you made it really easy for me, literally living like 30 minutes away from me and driving over and meeting me at the local Dairy Queen to swap sneakers. But yeah, like that's, and you know, for me, I want to wear these. I'm going to wear them as much as I can. But the day when they, you know, decide to fall apart or the sole or whatever, I'm just going to put them on display at that point and be okay with it. So hopefully I can get in, you know, maybe 10 wears. Otherwise I'll have to answer to my wife about,
definitely. You don't have to worry about 10.
You see, you're that confident in these STPs.
I'm so confident. I've worn my Kentucky's probably like 50 to 100 times.
Oh, holy shit. Oh, so you're saying like I got life in these.
Oh yeah, you can wear those like every day this week.
I'm worried more about collars than I am about like outsoles and stuff like that with these. Like, yeah, I have no fear on mine. The problem is that, and this is a good question to educate our listeners, is the sizing. Because I went a full size up on the Chicago's, which was kind of special because like 13 is MJ size, 13 and a half. But then on the Royals, the condition was too good. The price was too good. And I was like, I'm not going to wear them a ton. I go with a 12 and they're snug. So do you find that consistent with all of the factories, Ty?
Yeah, I tell people to go half size up. I think the length is the same for the shoes, but they're narrower than the releases now, if that makes sense. The leather and everything. I think the leather shrunk over years too. So I think that has something to do with it. But yeah, no, I tell people if you're an 11 in newer shoes, then get an 11 and a half and so on. So that's worked out and everyone's being happy that's purchased. So
yeah, I have to run that last question that you asked me back, DP, because I would be remiss if I didn't mention this being a major spark in my like appetite for vintage Air Jordan 1s, which was this. When this shoe dropped, I went to the Nike. This was back when I was working at Jordan. I went to the Nike DNA, the Department of Nike Archives, where they basically have one of every shoe for the most part. And we shot this, and was my favorite story to this day that I did at Jordan Brand with, you know, the black toe and then the neutral gray on top. And I was there we were being really careful wearing gloves, holding the OG pairs that Nike has had for all these decades. And it really got me excited about like, all right, well, because I always thought they were out of reach price range, and they are definitely an investment, right? But it was really like seeing the OGs together like that. And then obviously Union going all in on that vintage feel that also sparked, because it was around that time that was 2018. By 2019 I was already turning those alerts on different sites to try to find my size. So definitely a lot of credit to Union for that vintage wave as well.
Oh man, I remember the internet reaction to that, the first Union ones. Never react to early leaks of shoes, the internet. That's my advice. But yeah, it's absolutely true. I think those had a play in it because it started telling a little, you know, a longer term play, but started telling the story around, you know, vintage and taking the inspiration from that stuff. So,
and then like, even like the idea of thrifting was in Chris Gibbs's actual storytelling for the shoe. Like, hey, he imagined that somebody found a pair thrifting, found another pair, cobbled them together type of thing. So it was like that spirit of why Ty got into this is directly influenced the design of a shoe that's now iconic, but definitely 85 inspired. The next thing I want to talk about with you, Ty, is 85s are a finite resource, right? They're going to run out eventually, especially with its current wave. But yeah, there's always going to be pairs here and there, but eventually they're going to become out of reach, right? So I've been telling my friends forever, 01s are like the best, the most vintage you can get. And honestly, 01s this year are 2 decades old. So they are vintage. 94s are a good option too. I have my Chicago's here, but there's no Royals in '94. There's only two colorways, right? It's bread and Chicago's, and '94s are great. To me, it's my favorite shape, but of retros. But what do you think is next up? If you're just getting into it, and now again, 85s aren't out of reach, but they're not as accessible as even a year ago. Do you see the same sort of like, I've already seen '01 prices double in the last year. Is that what you're seeing on your end too? And then what about '94s, '95s?
I think it honestly depends what color you're after. If you're after a Chicago or a black and red or a band or bread, whatever you want to call them, I'd always say 94, especially if you're going to wear the pair, because to find a wearable 85 is going to be a lot harder than to find a wearable 94. Like I've maybe come across 3 pairs total of 94s that weren't wearable. Whereas 85s, there's a lot more, but I filter all the ones that aren't wearable typically out because I want to be able to provide shoes that people can wear and they don't have to worry about. I think that was a big part of me learning when I first started selling these shoes. Was I was getting some pairs and I was like, I didn't know that the bottom was hard and that they can't be worn. And kind of, I learned from that. So now I can tell from like a picture, which is kind of crazy to think if I could tell if the bottoms are going to be like soft or whatnot. But yeah, no, I definitely say 94s if they're after Royals, then I guess you'd have to say 01s. But I like the 01s. I wish they were taller.
Yep.
The cut of them. But other than that, I think the leather on them is super nice.
Yeah. The '01 definitely is flirting with the mid/high territory there. But yeah, no, I do think, like I keep telling my friends, '01s, man, because at some point we're gonna get to the point where '01s are as far back as you can go on these shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even just a year ago, they're around 400 or 500. Now they're around 700, 800, 900. And it's only a matter of time where people have to move on from 85s unless you're a hardcore collector or buyer, or you have the pocketbook to do that and find the next chapter of vintage. And 94s to me just seem like there's not a lot of them compared to other retros. So it's tough.
It's funny you say you're the reason why I grabbed the '01 Royals. Like when you say your friends, like I was one of them who listened to you, because I want to say is it Gusto the Ninja out of Japan? Yeah.
Gusto,
he had a pair up on his site for like literally sitting. Like I thought about it for like a week. In a size 11 '01, and I want to say I paid like $400 for them, $450 shipped, which felt again like a lot. But looking back at it now, that was a great purchase, and the whole experience of opening up that '01 pair was awesome, from packaging to the card to the hang tag and everything.
Yeah. So Ty, as we wrap up here, what are some of the other shoes you're getting a lot of requests for? It sounds like you're really diving into OG Dunks now. What are, outside of Jordan 1s or even Jordan vintage as a whole, what do you see coming from a popularity standpoint?
Good question. Definitely SBs and Pro Bs, like if you guys know the putties and like the Smurfs, and obviously like the OG Supremes from '02, the white cements, the black cements, the red cements, Uncles. I really want to get a pair of Parises. That's another goal of mine, is to complete the whole city pack. But now that shoe is getting so crazy that I'm just like, I don't know if I'll be able to pull it off. But SBs, definitely a lot of interest within those, as well as just like older vintage Nikes that aren't Jordans, but just vintage Nikes from the 80s. Those have a lot of interest in them as well. And obviously not as many people want them because they don't have all the hype around them. But I think that like conventions, for instance, I think are so underrated. Are you familiar with conventions?
I've heard of them. The convention. They're in that famous Nike commercial in the white ad, the white and orange color.
Yeah, they came out in 1986. I think that shoe is so similar to Air Jordan 1. I think that shoe could blow up as well. But I mean, you have to be into the vintage scene. I see Air Forces, like OG Air Forces. I think that could be the next big thing. There's so many good colorways. I don't think they get the love that they deserve, but We'll see what happens. I'm
gonna go grab. I have them within reach, but I'm gonna get off camera real quick to grab a few pairs. But I think there's something there. The reason why I've been liking the OG vintage Nikes because not only am I finding sick pairs that are wearable, there's not as much hype, so the price isn't bad. But also, I'm learning shoes that I didn't know existed. Right, like I'm gonna grab it right now. I have 2 pairs that I bought in the last year from like the early '90s that are great. But while I'm doing that, I do want to point out that it's so interesting to know because I was expecting your answer to say, hey, 85s are this and OG dunks, and now I'm moving on to. You really had to skip a decade and a half to get to SBs, right? And part of that is just wearability, right? A lot of that '90s stuff. Whether it's a 3, whether it's 11, whether it's an Air Max, stuff is just flat out not wearable anymore because of material. So I got these about a year ago for like $160, the Air Analog, and like, dude, I've worn them like 10 times. They're falling apart a little bit, but like, look at that suede, and I'm pretty sure that was white when it first dropped, but now it's like that perfect cream.
It looks like a sky, not a Skyline. Is it a Skyline?
Yeah, it's very much that family. I think it's the same year. You know, like Nike DNA is usually you could kind of see where it came from. Oh man, I have the and this is back when it came with like inserts to change, like not the insoles, but to little pods to put in there.
Arch supports.
Yeah, the arch supports.
I have some in a box next to me.
Yeah, and then I got this one. Which I tell DP, remind me the tag that I told you about of that Canadian department store.
Oh God!
Oh, it's right here.
Zellers?
Yeah, here it is. The tag.
I mean, he might not have even been born.
I remember Zellers. Zellers. Yeah.
And like to me, this is just a great. The boxes always are dope too because I'm old enough to remember boxes like this, like from my childhood. Those like skinny Nike boxes. But I mean, even this something like this, I get it for a decent price. It's super wearable. DS. Zeller's tag on it. This is a Nike, I want to say Fast Court Low, and it has like that Air Revolution DNA to it. So you can, well, Air Revolution was the 80s, but this is an early 90s shoe according to Google and some people that I spoke to. But like, dude, like this is exciting because there's a lot of wearable shoes out there that are off the radar. Like if I pull up to somewhere with these, no one else is gonna have the shoe on,
and no one will know what they are. And
that's exciting. Like, so that's the part is like not only finding like shoes like a Chicago AJ1, but like finding a shoe that, you know, somebody would have been rocking in the early 90s to hoop in or to run in. And that's where I think that this vintage thing is just like, we're just getting started, right? Because this stuff's exciting.
I was telling DP off camera, actually, today I had this pair. I wish I didn't ship them out, but I just shipped them out. I was selling them, which was this pair from 84. And I couldn't figure out what they were. It was like a cross between a Nike Penetrator / Blazer / Skyforce. Like every shoe that I looked at, I couldn't figure it out because the toe box was different on this pair, but like the overall shape of it would look like one shoe, but then wasn't that shoe because the toe box was different and so on. I couldn't figure it out. So
did you take a picture of it?
I do have a video of it. Yes.
Okay, good. Well, let's send it to the SoleSavy community and we got some OGs who can maybe help you hunt it down, figure out what they might be. They might have had them in 84.
Yeah, well, that'd be crazy.
The other thing that's cool about discovering shoes like that is you never know what the next trend is going to be. Like, just imagine a few years ago, you got your hands on a New Balance 550 and you're like, okay, cool. And then 5 years later, somebody like ALD decides to remix it. And now it's like the hottest shoe in the world. So you never know like what's actually next, right? From a trend perspective. So it's super fun to be hunting like that.
Yeah. Collect what you love. No matter what else is driving you, and the collection, that's all that matters, right?
To add on to hunting, I think that's one of my favorite things within the 85s and just original Nikes to begin with is like, I can't go out there and just find a pair. Like even if I have X amount of money, I can't go out and just say, I want a metallic orange, I'm going to go and buy it.
Yes. And that's a great point because I think one thing to add to like the why, we've had this discussion around like, what is a grail to people anymore? We asked a bunch of different, people in the sneaker space that have been around for a while. And one of the points that came up was, is something a grail if you can go to a marketplace right now and search it and hit buy? Is that a grail? And I think kind of the vintage 85s, kind of hearing you talk about it, is it can genuinely be a grail because you're going to have to hunt, you're going to have to search, you might have to not in this day and age, but you might have to fly to Japan to go grab a pair to find it from that collector who has it, right? I think that's part of a lot of the fun. And I'm curious, have you been to Portland, Oregon yet?
I have not.
You have not? Look at this guy.
I've been there. I went there years ago, but it wasn't for shoes or anything.
We're gonna have to next content series. Ty goes to Portland and finds absolutely no vintage Nikes and Jordans because nothing gets by in that city.
Yeah. I do have to ask one last question before we jump out. What was up with the shadow with the red outsole? Like, how does that shoe exist, and how did you get a hold of it?
See, that one, I don't know if that's like an original. It is an original sole, but I don't know if that was an actual release. I think someone custom that pair, but I do have a Chicago that's from '86 that has the black sole on it.
And then there's like the different tongues, right, on the black toes and different, man, it's just, there's a million rabbit holes to go down when it comes to vintage sneakers. And Ty, we thank you for diving down a few of those with us today. Join us on the podcast. For all of our listeners, all of our SoleSavy members, that's Ty. You can find him at Curated Van on Instagram. Great page to follow if you're on the lookout for some vintage sneakers. But even if you're not, you're going to be amazed every day to see the type of things that this guy sources. So Ty, appreciate you joining us, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.